For 12 years, Nyasha Moyo believed she had the kind of marriage people only dreamed about. She and her husband, Omari Dubé, lived in Gaborone, Botswana, where friends and family often called them the perfect couple. They laughed together, celebrated every anniversary, and supported each other through every challenge. Whenever someone asked Nyasha the secret to a happy marriage, she would smile and say, "Trust each other no matter what." She never imagined those words would one day come back to haunt her. That evening felt completely ordinary. Omari had just come home from work looking a little tired. They chatted about dinner, laughed over a funny story from his office, and planned a quiet weekend together. Nothing seemed unusual. A few minutes later, Omari walked upstairs to take a shower, leaving his phone on the coffee table in the living room. Nyasha was folding laundry while soft music played in the background. Then the room suddenly fell silent as Omari's phone vibrated. She wasn't trying to invade his privacy, but the bright screen lit up before her eyes. One message appeared across the display. "Last night meant everything to me. I can't stop thinking about you." Nyasha froze. Her hands began to shake, and the shirt she was holding slipped onto the floor. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. The words didn't look like a mistake. They didn't sound like work. They sounded deeply personal. In that single moment, 12 years of trust suddenly felt fragile. Standing alone in her living room, Nyasha wondered if everything she believed about her marriage had been nothing more than a beautiful illusion. Omari came downstairs a few minutes later with a towel around his neck, drying his hair as if nothing had happened. Nyasha was still standing near the coffee table, trying to hide the shock on her face. Before she could even speak, Omari noticed his phone in her hand. For just a second, the smile on his face disappeared. His eyes widened, and his shoulders became stiff. It was only a tiny reaction, but Nyasha saw it. After 12 years of marriage, she knew every expression on her husband's face. Trying to sound calm, she asked, "Who is Lillian?" Omari quickly took the phone from her hand and forced a small laugh. "It's just work," he said. "A client sent the message by mistake. You're reading too much into it." His words sounded confident, but everything else about him told a different story. He wouldn't look her in the eyes. He unlocked his phone almost too quickly, turned the screen away from her, and slipped it into his pocket. Then he immediately changed the subject and asked what they were having for dinner. Nyasha wanted to believe him. She truly did. For 12 years, Omari had been her best friend, her partner, and the man she trusted more than anyone else. She kept telling herself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe he was right. Maybe it really was just work. But deep inside, something didn't feel right anymore. That night, they went to bed as usual, but nothing felt normal. Omari fell asleep surprisingly fast, breathing peacefully beside her. Nyasha lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those same words glowing on his phone. "Last night meant everything to me. I can't stop thinking about you." The message played over and over in her mind like a song she couldn't stop hearing. She began replaying the last 12 years of their marriage. Their beautiful wedding day. Their first tiny apartment. The nights they stayed up dreaming about their future. The vacations they saved for. The birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet evenings they spent laughing together. Had all of it been real? Or had she missed signs that had been there all along? Then other memories slowly started coming back. Omari working later than usual. Business trips that seemed to happen more often. Phone calls he suddenly started taking outside. Moments she had ignored because she trusted him without question. By 3 o'clock in the morning, Nyasha still hadn't slept. Tears quietly rolled down her face as she realized something painful. It wasn't only the message that was breaking her heart. It was the fear that the man she had loved for 12 years might be someone she never truly knew. As the first light of morning entered the room, Nyasha made one silent promise to herself. She would not accuse him without proof. She would not let fear control her. But she also would never ignore that message again. Whatever the truth was, she was going to find it, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, Nyasha acted like everything was normal. She smiled over breakfast, asked Omari about his meetings, and even wished him a good day before he left for work. On the outside she looked calm. Inside, her heart was filled with questions she couldn't answer. She kept reminding herself of the promise she had made the night before. She would not accuse her husband without proof. If there was an explanation, she wanted to know the truth. If there was a lie, she wanted to uncover it with facts, not emotions. Over the next few days, Nyasha started paying attention to the little things she had once ignored. She noticed that Omari had begun taking phone calls late at night. Whenever his phone rang, he would quietly leave the room or step outside onto the balcony. If she walked near him, he would lower his voice or end the call quickly. When she asked who it was, he always had a simple answer. Just work. Those 2 words were starting to lose their meaning. Then she noticed something else. Omari had changed the password on his phone. For years, they had known each other's passwords without thinking twice. They had never hidden anything. Now, whenever he unlocked his phone, he made sure the screen faced away from her. At night, instead of leaving it on the bedside table, he kept it under his pillow or carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom. Nyasha tried to convince herself she was overthinking, but every day brought another small change. A week later, Omari suddenly announced another business trip. It was the 3rd one in less than 2 months. Before, he would tell her about work travel weeks in advance. Now he mentioned it only a day before leaving. "It's just a quick meeting," he said with a smile. Nyasha smiled back, but something inside her whispered that he wasn't telling the whole truth. After he left, she sat down to organize their monthly household budget. She had always managed the family finances, so unusual payments immediately caught her attention. There were expensive restaurant bills in places Omari had never mentioned, hotel charges that didn't match his business schedule, gifts from luxury stores she had never received, small amounts of money transferred to accounts she didn't recognize. Her hands grew cold as she scrolled through the statements. Each expense alone could have had an innocent explanation, but together they painted a picture she didn't want to believe. Still, Nyasha refused to jump to conclusions. She knew suspicion could destroy a marriage just as quickly as betrayal could. She wanted evidence, not guesses. She wanted truth, not assumptions. So she stayed quiet. She watched. She listened. She remembered every detail. With every late-night call, every hidden password, every sudden trip, and every strange expense, the weight in her heart became heavier. The message that had once seemed like a single painful moment was beginning to feel like the first piece of a much bigger secret. For the first time in 12 years, Nyasha realized she was no longer living with certainty. She was living with questions. And deep inside, she feared that the answers would change her life forever. For almost 2 weeks, Nyasha carried the weight of her doubts alone. Every smile she forced felt heavier than the last. She couldn't concentrate at work, she barely ate, and every time Omari's phone rang, her heart skipped a beat. She needed someone she could trust. One Saturday afternoon, she called her best friend, Abani Cohn, and asked if they could meet for coffee. The moment Abani saw Nyasha's face, she knew something was wrong. "You don't have to pretend with me," Abani said softly. The words were enough to break the wall Nyasha had been holding up. Tears filled her eyes as she told Abani everything. She talked about the mysterious text message, Omari's late-night calls, the hidden phone password, the unexpected business trips, and the strange money he had been spending. When she finished, she lowered her head and whispered, "Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I'm destroying my own marriage because of one message." Abani reached across the table and gently held her hand. "No," she said calmly. "Trust is beautiful, but blind trust can be dangerous." Those words stayed in the air for several seconds. Abani wasn't telling Nyasha to end her marriage. She wasn't encouraging revenge or anger. She simply wanted her friend to know the truth before making any decision. "If Omari is innocent," Abani continued, "then the truth will protect your marriage. But if he's lying, the truth will protect you." For the first time since receiving that message, Nyasha felt her mind become clear. She realized she didn't want more arguments or excuses. She wanted facts. The following Monday, Abani gave her the contact information of a respected private investigator named Jabarin Dlovu. Jabari had quietly handled many difficult family and financial investigations over the years. He was known for being patient, careful, and completely professional. Nyasha was nervous as she walked into his office. She had never imagined she would one day hire someone to investigate her own husband. Jabari listened without interrupting while she explained everything from the beginning. He took notes but never judged her. When she finished, he folded his notebook and looked at her kindly. "Mrs. Moyo," he said, "my job isn't to prove your husband guilty. My job is to find the truth, whatever it may be." Nyasha slowly nodded. "I can handle the truth," she whispered. "I just can't handle living with questions anymore." Jabari explained that investigations took time. He would quietly observe Omari's movements, verify his business trips, review public records where legally available, and gather evidence without attracting attention. Nyasha agreed. She wanted everything done legally and carefully. As she left the office, her phone buzzed with a message from Omari. "Working late again. Don't wait up for dinner." A week earlier, she would have believed him without hesitation. Now, instead of replying immediately, she looked at the message, took a deep breath, and slipped her phone back into her bag. For the first time since that heartbreaking text message appeared on the coffee table, someone else was searching for the answers. And although Nyasha didn't know what Jabari would discover, she had a feeling her life was about to change forever. The first few days of the investigation felt painfully slow. Every morning, Nyasha woke up hoping for answers, but none came. She continued living her normal life while pretending nothing had changed. She cooked dinner, went to work, and smiled when people asked about her marriage. Meanwhile, Omari acted as if everything was perfectly normal. Then, almost 3 weeks after the investigation began, Jabari finally called. His voice sounded serious. "Nyasha, I think we should meet in person." The moment she heard those words, her stomach tightened. That afternoon, she sat across from Jabari in his office. A thick folder rested on the desk between them. Before opening it, Jabari looked at her carefully. "What I'm about to show you may be difficult to hear." Nyasha took a deep breath and nodded. She thought she was about to learn details about an affair. She had no idea the truth was much bigger. Jabari opened the folder and began laying documents across the desk. There were photographs, travel records, financial statements, and business documents. The evidence confirmed that Omari had been spending time with Lillian and Jerry. The late-night calls, secret meetings, and unexplained trips were real. Nyasha felt her heart sink. Even though she had suspected it, seeing proof was different. It hurt in a way she couldn't describe. But then Jabari placed another set of papers in front of her. "There's more," he said quietly. Nyasha looked down at the documents. Bank transfers, property records, business agreements. First, none of it made sense. Then Jabari began explaining. Over the past year, Omari had been quietly moving money out of accounts connected to their family. He had transferred large amounts into new accounts that Nyasha knew nothing about. Some properties had been partially reassigned through complicated paperwork. Investments they had built together were being shifted into structures designed to reduce her control and ownership. Nyasha stared at the pages in disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered. Jabari slid another document toward her. It was right. Every signature, every transfer, every date, everything was there. Tears filled her eyes as she realized this wasn't simply about another woman. Omari hadn't just been hiding an affair. He had been building an entirely separate life while secretly protecting assets for himself. The man she trusted with her heart had also been making financial decisions behind her back. Suddenly, dozens of moments from the past year started making sense. The strange expenses, the unexpected meetings, the sudden business trips, the unexplained withdrawals. All the small pieces she couldn't connect before were now forming a clear picture. The room felt colder. For 12 years, Nyasha had believed she and Omari were building a future together. Now she was staring at evidence that suggested he had been planning for a future without her. The pain of the text message had once felt unbearable. Now it seemed almost small compared to what she had discovered. As she slowly closed the folder, a painful realization settled into her heart. That message on Omari's phone had not been the real betrayal. It had only been the door that opened to a much darker truth. The affair was never the whole story. It was only the beginning, and for the first time, Nyasha understood that she wasn't uncovering a single lie. She was uncovering a secret life. For 2 days, Nyasha couldn't stop thinking about the investigation report. The evidence was clear, but one question still haunted her. Did Lillian know Omari was a married man? She asked Jabari if he could arrange a meeting. At first, he warned her to be careful. Emotions are high in situations like this, he said. Go there looking for the truth, not a fight. Nyasha agreed. A few days later, Jabari called to say Lillian had agreed to meet. They chose a quiet cafe on the other side of Gaborone where no one was likely to recognize them. As Nyasha walked in, her heart was racing. She had imagined this moment 100 different ways. She expected anger. She expected excuses. She expected a woman who wanted to defend Omari. Instead, she saw a young woman sitting alone, nervously stirring a cup of coffee with trembling hands. Lillian stood as soon as Nyasha approached. You must be Nyasha, she said quietly. Nyasha simply nodded and sat down. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Nyasha looked into Lillian's eyes and asked the question that had been burning inside her ever since she saw that text message. Did you know Omari has been married to me for 12 years? Lillian's face immediately turned pale. What? She whispered. Nyasha slowly placed a wedding photo on the table. Lillian stared at the picture in complete shock. No, she said, shaking her head. He told me he was divorced. He said the marriage ended years ago. He even told me he lived alone. Nyasha felt every emotion inside her suddenly stop. She had prepared herself for lies. She had not prepared herself for this. Lillian reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. With tears filling her eyes, she showed Nyasha dozens of messages from Omari. In every conversation, he described himself as a lonely man trying to rebuild his life after a painful divorce. He had promised Lillian a future together. He had talked about buying a home. He had spoken about marriage. None of it was true. I would never have dated him if I'd known he had a wife, Lillian said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, Nyasha didn't see an enemy sitting across from her. She saw another woman whose trust had also been stolen. The two of them spent nearly 2 hours talking. Piece by piece they compared dates, messages and stories. Every time they matched another detail, another one of Omari's lies fell apart. He had used the same promises, the same excuses, the same business trips. Sometimes he had told both women different stories on the very same day. By the end of the meeting, both of them were emotionally exhausted. Lillian wiped away her tears and quietly said, He didn't just betray you, he lied to me too. Nyasha slowly nodded. For weeks, she had imagined that the woman behind the message was the reason her marriage was falling apart. Now she finally understood the truth. The real problem had never been the woman sitting across the table. The real problem was the man who had chosen to deceive them both. As they stood to leave, neither woman felt victory, only sadness. But they also shared something else. The truth. And for the first time since that heartbreaking text message appeared on Omari's phone, Nyasha no longer felt alone. She and Lillian had realized they were never fighting each other. They had both been victims of the same man. After meeting Lillian, Nyasha made a decision that surprised even herself. She was not going to confront Omari right away. She had cried enough. She had asked enough questions. Now it was time to protect herself. When she returned home that evening, Omari was sitting on the couch watching television as if nothing had happened. How was your day? He asked with a smile. It was good, Nyasha replied calmly. She smiled back, cooked dinner and talked about ordinary things. They ate together, laughed at a funny commercial, and cleaned the kitchen like they always had. Omari never noticed that something had changed inside her. For the first time since receiving that heartbreaking text message, Nyasha stopped looking for explanations. She already had the truth. Now she needed to protect her future. The next morning, she met with lawyer Salma Okonkwo. Jabari had already shared the investigation findings with Salma, and she carefully reviewed every document spread across her desk. Salma looked at Nyasha and spoke gently. "You've already done the hardest part," she said. "You found the truth. Now let's make sure the law protects you." Over the next several days, Nyasha quietly worked with Salma. They collected every important document connected to their marriage and finances. Together, they organized bank statements, investment records, property papers, business contracts, tax documents, insurance policies, and years of financial records. Every paper was copied, dated, and safely stored. Nothing would disappear. Nothing could be changed without leaving a record. As Salma reviewed the files, she found even more unusual financial activity. Some transfers had happened only a few weeks earlier. A few important documents had been signed without Nyasha ever knowing they existed. The evidence continued growing. Each new page made it clearer that Omari hadn't been making careless mistakes. He had been making careful plans. Meanwhile, at home, Omari believed everything was perfectly normal. He continued leaving for his business trips. He still answered mysterious phone calls outside. He still smiled across the dinner table and talked about future vacations as if their marriage had no problems at all. Sometimes he even brought Nyasha flowers on his way home from work. Months earlier, those flowers would have filled her heart with happiness. Now they only reminded her how easily someone could hide behind a smile. Still, Nyasha never argued. She never accused him. She never mentioned Jabari. She never mentioned Lillian. She simply watched and waited. Every evening, after Omari fell asleep, she quietly reviewed another folder with Salma's notes. Every signature, every bank transfer, every property record was being carefully prepared for the day everything would finally come into the open. There were moments when Nyasha wanted to confront him immediately. She wanted to place the evidence on the table and demand answers. But Salma reminded her to stay patient. "The strongest case," Salma said, "is the one built with facts, not emotions." Nyasha listened. She knew the storm was coming, but she also knew that timing could change everything. So she remained calm while Omari continued living inside the lie he had created. He smiled. He made plans. He believed his secrets were safe. What he didn't know was that every day brought Nyasha one step closer to the moment when his carefully built world would finally collapse under the weight of the truth. A few weeks later, their 12th wedding anniversary finally arrived. Omari insisted on celebrating at one of the nicest restaurants in Gaborone. He even made the reservation himself and told Nyasha he wanted the evening to be special. Nyasha agreed without hesitation. She wore a beautiful dress, smiled politely, and carried a simple leather folder in her handbag. From the outside, she looked like a wife excited to celebrate another year of marriage. Inside, she knew this would be the last anniversary they would ever share. The restaurant was filled with soft music and warm lights. Couples laughed together while waiters moved quietly between the tables. Omari seemed happier than he had been in weeks. "I've missed nights like this," he said as they looked at the menu. Nyasha smiled gently. "So have I." Dinner arrived, and they talked about ordinary things. Omari told funny stories from work. He spoke about future travel plans and even suggested taking a vacation together later that year. Every word felt strange to Nyasha. She wondered how someone could talk about the future while hiding so many lies. After dessert, Omari stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The quiet sound caught everyone's attention. People around the restaurant turned to watch. Omari smiled proudly at his wife. "I just want to say something," he began. He spoke about their 12 years together. He thanked Nyasha for standing beside him through every challenge. He called her his best friend, his greatest blessing, and the love of his life. Several guests smiled. Some even applauded. Anyone watching would have believed they were looking at the happiest couple in the room. When Omari finished speaking, he leaned over and reached for Nyasha's hand. Instead of taking it, Nyasha slowly opened her handbag. Without saying a single word, she placed a thick leather folder in the center of the table. Omari looked at it with a confused smile. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it," Nyasha replied quietly. The smile on his face disappeared as he opened the folder. The first pages contained screenshots of the messages between him and Lillian. The next section showed photographs from Jabari's investigation. Then came copies of bank transfers, hidden financial records, and documents showing the secret movement of family assets. With every page he turned, the color slowly drained from his face. His hands began to shake. The restaurant had become completely silent. Nearby conversations stopped. Even the waiters seemed frozen as they noticed something was terribly wrong. Finally, Omari reached the last document. It was neatly signed and prepared. Divorce papers. He stared at them for several seconds without speaking. His lips moved, but no words came out. Then he looked up at Nyasha. "Please," he whispered. "We can talk about this." Nyasha's voice remained calm. "We've had 12 years to talk." She looked directly into his eyes. "You chose lies instead." A heavy silence filled the room. No one clapped anymore. No one smiled. The romantic anniversary dinner had turned into the moment Omari's carefully hidden life fell apart. For the first time since that single text message appeared on his phone, he realized Nyasha knew everything. Not just about the affair. Not just about Lillian. She knew about the money. She knew about the secret transfers. She knew about every lie he had told. And there was nothing left for him to hide. The anniversary he had planned to celebrate became the dinner he would remember for the rest of his life, not because of love, but because it was the night he lost the woman who had trusted him for 12 years. The restaurant slowly returned to normal after the manager politely guided the curious guests back to their own tables. But for Omari and Nyasha, nothing would ever be normal again. Omari kept staring at the papers in front of him. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold them. The confident man who had stood only minutes earlier to give a romantic speech had completely disappeared. He looked at Nyasha with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please. I'm so sorry." Nyasha quietly watched him without saying a word. "It was a mistake," Omari continued. "I never wanted to hurt you. Things just got out of control." For the first time that evening, Nyasha finally spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and completely free of anger. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary," she said. "A mistake is taking the wrong road home. This was a choice you made every single day." Omari lowered his head. She continued, "You chose to lie. You chose to hide your phone. You chose to meet another woman. You chose to move our money behind my back. None of that happened by accident." Every sentence felt heavier than the one before. Omari couldn't deny any of it because every lie was already sitting inside the folder between them. "I'll end everything," he said desperately. "I'll never speak to Lillian again. I'll bring the money back. I'll do whatever you ask. Please don't leave me." Nyasha looked at him for a long moment. She remembered the young man she had married 12 years earlier. She remembered their wedding vows, the dreams they had shared, and the future they had planned together. She had once believed they would grow old side by side. Now she realized she had been mourning that future long before this dinner. "You keep asking me to forgive today's apology," she said softly. "But what about all the days before today? What about every morning you looked me in the eyes and lied? What about every night you came home pretending to be an honest husband?" Omari had no answer. His silence said everything. For the first time since the affair began, he understood the real damage he had caused. He hadn't only broken Nyasha's trust, he had destroyed the foundation of their entire marriage. The divorce papers were no longer just pieces of paper. They were the consequence of hundreds of decisions he had made over months. He slowly picked up the pen lying beside the documents. His hands trembled again. At that moment, he finally understood something he had refused to believe. There would be no second chance. No promise could erase the evidence. No apology could rebuild 12 years of broken trust overnight. As Nyasha stood up from the table, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. She wasn't walking away because she hated him. She was walking away because she finally loved herself enough to stop accepting less than honesty. Omari remained sitting alone, surrounded by untouched food, empty chairs, and the silence of his own choices. Only then did he truly understand that he hadn't lost his marriage because of one text message. He had lost it because he had chosen, day after day, to betray the woman who trusted him more than anyone else. Several months passed, and life slowly began to feel peaceful again for Nyasha. The divorce was finalized, the legal matters were settled, and for the first time in a long time, she woke up without fear or anxiety. Healing wasn't easy, but every new day reminded her that she had made the right decision. Instead of looking back, she focused on building a new future. Using her years of experience, Nyasha started her own consulting business in Gaborone. At first, she worked from a small office with only a few clients. But people respected her honesty, professionalism, and hard work. Word spread quickly, and her business continued to grow. Every success reminded her that she was stronger than the pain she had survived. One sunny afternoon, Nyasha met her best friend, Abani, at a quiet coffee shop they both loved. They sat outside, laughing over old memories and talking about the future instead of the past. Abani smiled and raised her coffee cup. "I finally have my best friend back," she said. Nyasha laughed softly. "I finally have myself back." At that very moment, a man walking on the other side of the street suddenly stopped. It was Omari. He noticed Nyasha immediately. She looked different. Not because of her clothes or hairstyle. She looked peaceful. The sadness that had once filled her eyes was gone. She was smiling without pretending. She was living without fear. She had rebuilt a life that no longer depended on someone else's honesty. Omari stood there quietly, watching from a distance. He wanted to walk over. He wanted to apologize one more time. He wanted to tell her how much he regretted everything. But he knew it was too late. Some doors close forever. As he watched Nyasha laughing with Abani, the truth finally settled deep inside his heart. His marriage had not ended because of one message on a phone. It had ended because of every lie he chose to tell, every secret he chose to keep, every promise he chose to break. The text message had simply exposed what had already been happening in the shadows. Nyasha looked up for a moment and noticed Omari standing across the street. Their eyes met briefly. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel revenge. She simply smiled politely, turned back to Abani, and continued her conversation. She had already left that chapter of her life behind. Omari remained standing there alone, realizing that the greatest loss of his life wasn't his house, his money, or the divorce. It was losing the only woman who had loved him with complete trust. Final line. "I trusted my husband for 12 years, but one text message didn't destroy my marriage. It revealed that it had already been broken by the man I trusted most."